In the heart of a divided Europe, during an era defined by secrecy and paranoia, stood imposing institutions crafted from steel and stone. These prisons were designed not only to hold the physically condemned, but also the ideologically unyielding. The atmosphere was thick with an electric tension that hummed like an unseen current, where any conversation could reveal trust or treachery. As the Cold War raged, the inmates inside these walls weren't just criminals, they were pawns in a larger game. Within the confines of East Germany's infamous Stasi prisons, the air was acrid with the scent of damp stone and stale food. The cells were austere, offering little solace, just gray concrete and bars that made escape an improbable dream. Among the inhabitants were those who had dared to resist their regime, dissidents, intellectuals, and everyday citizens who had sought a whisper of freedom. Each held a fragment of historical truth that challenged the very fabric of their confinement. Day by day, guards patrolled the corridors, their uniforms crisp and intimidating as they slammed the heavy doors behind them. Among these wardens was a man named Klaus, a stoic figure exuding the authority bestowed upon him by the state. His voice resonated like thunder, commanding attention in the sterile halls. Yet behind his disciplined facade lay a creeping disillusionment, birthed by the heavy conscience his profession demanded. Klaus forged a relationship with one particular inmate, a journalist named Anya, a woman whose fierce spirit flared against the darkness surrounding her. As they exchanged words, the lines between captor and captive began to blur. Anya's fiery passion for truth intrigued Klaus. With each shared conversation, a bond formed amidst an ocean of oppression. While their fates seemed intricately linked by the razor-sharp barbed wire surrounding them, the duality of their juxtaposed worlds began to unravel secrets, both dangerous and unspeakable. Amidst hushed conversations and fleeting glances, Anya's tales of oppression echoed in Klaus's mind. Yet she was not the only one with stories to tell. Resistance ran like an undercurrent through the prison. Ian, another inmate, orchestrated rallies of quiet dissent, his furtive gestures and painstaking planning eluding the watchful eyes of the guards. Here, in the dim light of their cells, dreams were woven into plans, and hope extinguished the fear that bound them. As they navigated this complex web, the realization dawned on Klaus. Betrayal wasn't merely an act, it was a choice that carried the weight of survival. Yet the idea of siding with the very people he once guarded crept into his thoughts, a treacherous path that could lead him away from the confines of duty. The choice loomed like a specter in the dimly lit hallways, inching ever closer. Months passed without incident, but the tension inside the prison remained relentless. The inmates formed a clandestine network, coding their messages between the lines of letters, passing notes through cracks in the walls, carefully orchestrating their plans for freedom. Trust was a rare commodity forged in shared suffering, yet the risk of betrayal always loomed just a breath away. Klaus, now an unwilling ally to Anya and Ian, watched as the atmosphere tightened. The pressure grew as whispers of a potential prison break echoed within the stone walls. Each night, members of their ragtag network would gather in hushed corners, scheming ways to dismantle the system that had oppressed them for far too long. A promise of hope colored their discussions, but the fear of being discovered overshadowed every word. During one such clandestine meeting, Anya revealed her plan to leverage Klaus's position. "He's our key, a link to the outside world," she asserted, the urgency in her voice echoing against the cold concrete. Ian's eyes darted nervously around the room, silently gauging the implications of such a risky plan. The stakes were dire, and the notion of betrayal murmured like a ghost haunting their resolve. As days turned into weeks, the fabric of trust began to fray under the pressure of their hopes. Klaus remained torn, but the allure of a new life outside the oppressive walls began to eclipse his initial loyalty. The taste of freedom, once distant, now seemed tantalizingly close. The more he conversed with Anya, the deeper the pull became, inching him away from the institution he'd once served dutifully. But loyalty, as he'd come to learn, could incite torment in the hearts of men. Each day, the lines drawn between loyalty and treachery became blurred, echoing the larger geopolitical conflicts outside the prison's earthen walls. Rumors shifted like shadows, and suspicion hung thick in the air, with whispers of informants and agents lurking at every corner. Klaus could feel the eyes of the regime weighing on him, pressing down with a suffocating intensity. Amidst this charged atmosphere, a significant event rattled the prison. An unexpected inspection from higher-up sent shockwaves through both guards and inmates alike. For Klaus, this represented an uncertain moment that could tip the delicate balance he had fostered. "We cannot afford to be complacent," Anya warned, her voice trembling with urgency. "This is our chance." The tension mounted in those dank corridors, mirroring the pulse of the outside world, the world where the ideological clash of East and West had seeped into the lives of ordinary citizens. And amidst it all, a decision approached, one that would either shatter or fortify their fragile rebellion. The day of reckoning dawned with an air thick with anticipation. Klaus stood gazing at the stone walls that had become acrid with memories, the faces of the inmates haunting him, each one representing an individual yearning for liberation. The prison buzzed with uneasy energy as the inspection team arrived. Guards donned expressions of stern indifference, while inmates masked their trepidation with feigned composure beneath stoic exteriors. As the higher-ranking officers moved through the facility, Klaus couldn't shake the feeling that events were spiraling towards a conclusion. Each minute felt like an hour, every breath he took was laden with expectation. Anya's quiet voice lingered in his mind, urging him to prioritize their shared aspirations over the oppressive loyalty he had once upheld. "We have to act now," she murmured the night before, igniting a spark of rebellion that clashed with his conscience. During the inspection, tensions flared as guards began questioning the inmates. It was the perfect storm, a testing ground for loyalty. In the ensuing chaos, Klaus knew he had to make a choice. The image of Anya's fierce, defiant spirit ignited a fire within him, a reminder of the stark divide between the man he was expected to be and the man he longed to become. Amidst the uncertainty, Klaus took action. As the officers pressed the inmates for answers, he subtly slipped a note into Ian's pocket, a beacon of hope wrapped in a plea for freedom and a fervent promise to assist in their escape. "Tonight. We go tonight," it said, only barely disguised as a hurried reminder to remain vigilant amidst the chaos. But the moment had irrevocably changed. A muted gasp escaped Anya's lips as Klaus stood firm in the midst of scrutiny. "They'll see you, you'll be caught," she hissed, her eyes wide with urgency as the net tightened. In that moment, Klaus's resolve faltered, for he understood the risk his actions posed. Betrayal would echo with deadly resonance. But clarity surged within him as Ian met his gaze. Here, faced with a choice, he saw the flicker of solidarity in the inmates' eyes, unsteady yet resolute. They knew the stakes. Such acts of defiance could unearth the complex layers of espionage and deceit buried deep within the institutions they sought to dismantle. As freedom beckoned, the night fell heavy with anxiety cloaked in shadows. The prison's silence felt broken by the pounding of hearts as they prepared for the escape that was both a gamble and a lifeline. The plan evolved in whispers, but the urgency remained, a constant hum echoing through the bricks and mortar of their prison. The clock struck midnight, draping the facility in a cloak of darkness. Klaus slid through the corridors, heart racing as he felt the weight of his decision pressing heavily on him. Every footfall echoed off the cinderblock walls as he navigated the labyrinth of confinement. He could hear whispers in the stillness, the determined breaths of his comrades at the heart of their audacious plan. But in that seeming utopia of hope, betrayal lurked just beneath, sharp and ready to strike. High up in the uppermost floors, prison security monitored every inch of their movement, anticipating an uprising, not knowing it had already begun. As the inmates converged in whispered conspiracies, tension knitted between their breaths, each moment stretching both possibility and foreboding to the breaking point. Just as their escape plan unfolded, fate intervened. Klaus received word of an unexpected additional inspection, agents from the Ministry of State Security who were all too aware of the brewing descent. His heart sank. Would their plans be foiled by the weight of bureaucracy, ultimately exposing their vulnerability? In a precarious balancing act between determination and despair, Klaus pressed on. He found Ian in the dim light of the exit, gesturing urgently. "We have to go, now," he insisted, but Klaus hesitated, recognizing the implications of desertion, of abandoning his post. What was meant to be an escape transformed into an agonizing reckoning of identity. Just moments later, as the door creaked open, bright lights flooded the dim hallway. Guards swarmed, torches slicing through the darkness, illuminating the treachery festering within the walls. "It's a trap!" Anya screamed as panic erupted, voices rising in a cacophony of disbelief and chaos. Klaus felt his resolve tremble. The line he had crossed became a chasm, one that could consume them all. As the great doors swung shut behind them, the clang of metal formed a finality that echoed with an agonizing flattening of hope. Guards poured in, and in the ensuing explosion of chaos, Ian was seized, pleading for freedom as Klaus was forced to confront the dire implications of his failure. In that defining moment, he reached for Anya's hand. "I'll find a way for us, I promise." But she was taken, her voice swallowed by the commotion. Anna's defiant spirit now faded into the shadows, illuminated only by the bright, betraying lights of the watchful wardens. In the aftermath, Klaus faced the consequences of his choices in ways that words could not convey. His life stretched out in the bleak confines of betrayal, a warden tethered to the secrets he no longer protected, an inmate anchored by that same sense of freedom he yearned for. The walls crumbled around him, and the lens through which he once viewed his duty was shattered irrevocably. Ultimately, escape wasn't confined to physical barriers but instead occupied a far deeper terrain, the ideological battleground lying within every question of identity, loyalty, and betrayal. The war continued beyond the high prison walls, with both wardens and inmates caught in a complex web of entangled destinies. As the shadows loom larger, Klaus's remnants of hope slip quietly into the silence left behind, reminding us that war is not merely fought in distant lands, but within the very hearts of those brave enough to seek the truth. In the weeks that followed, the atmosphere in the prison tightened like a noose around Klaus's neck. Guards, emboldened by the disruptions caused by the botched escape, heightened their vigilance. They moved with an almost predatory alertness, their eyes scanning the inmates for any sign of rebellion. Walls that once echoed with muted conversations now pulsed with fear, a realization settling in that betrayal came with a price steeped in brutality. Klaus was summoned to a small, dimly lit office that reeked of stale coffee and cigarette smoke, a stark contrast to the polished uniforms outside. It was here that he faced Commander Wolf, a hard-faced man whose reputation for ruthlessness was known throughout the ranks. As Klaus sat across from him, the atmosphere thickened, the weight of scrutiny pressing down like an iron bar. "You're lucky to have escaped with your life after that debacle," Wolf said, his voice low and dripping with contempt. "But I suggest you consider your position carefully, falling. The next time they attempt something like that, they won't be as kind." Klaus swallowed hard, feeling the walls close in. "Sir, it won't happen again, Enough," Wolf interrupted, his piercing gaze fixing on Klaus. "You're either with us or against us, you know where your loyalties should lie. If this family of traitors is allowed to thrive, the price will be blood, yours or theirs." As he left the office, Klaus's heart thudded heavily in his chest. The stark reality of his situation loomed large. Any chance of forging a connection to the inmates had now become a liability, a risk too great. Trust, once a faint glimmer, was now a flickering flame on the brink of extinguishment. Days rolled into a spell of strange calm, punctuated by the whispers of fresh unrest brewing within the prison walls. The inmates began to close ranks, driven by a resolve formed from shared oppression. Though their hopes had dimmed, camaraderie flourished. Inside those cells, bonds of solidarity grew ever stronger, and amidst their despair, dreams of freedom morphed into a singular focus. Ian, whose resolve remained unyielding even after the failed escape, quietly became a leader among the inmates. His charisma and unwavering spirit provided a much-needed anchor, turning the sorrow of defeat into collective strength. He held clandestine meetings in dark corners, sharing news of the outside world, the ideological tug-of-war raging beyond the prison gates. Each tale, though dark, became a thread woven into the fabric of resistance. Klaus watched from a distance, wrestling with his conscience, grappling with the price of the choices he'd made. He'd come to learn of a formidable defiance that sprung from desperation, a trait he recognized in both Anya and Ian. The weight of his prior roles weighed heavily upon him, a man forbidden to cross the invisible lines drawn in the dust of duty. Then came an unexpected twist, the arrival of a new regime for the aging facility, a harder line taken against dissenters. News trickled down from the ranks, inmates who had participated in the uprising faced unrelenting punishment. The specter of retribution echoed through the stone corridors, and Klaus found himself haunted by a paralyzing fear of losing everything he had unlocked by betraying the prison's ideology. Once again, the presence of danger loomed, shadows flickering as though urging him to make a choice. The thought of betrayal teetered on the edge of his conscience, whispering sweet nothings that promised freedom from the confines he both loved and loathed. The climate within the prison shifted dramatically, mirroring the turbulent politics outside. Anya's absence left wounds that could not heal, her fate now uncertain, while Ian rallied the remaining allies to speak of hope amid despair. Their prison had transformed from mere confinement into a hotbed of resistance, and still Klaus stood on the sidelines, wrestling with the sense of accountability that warily settled around him. During a night filled with sharp whispers and fervent plans, Ian gathered his closest confidants in a seldom-used common area cloaked in darkness. "We cannot wait until the regime decides our fate for us," he spoke passionately, each word a rallying call. "We must take the fight to them, whether it costs us our lives or sets us free." Klaus lurked on the outskirts, caught between the obligation to protect the system he had long sworn allegiance to and the insistent pull of the resistance that had become a lifeline for so many. Each passing day weighed heavily on him, filling him with an urgency that became almost unbearable. The moment of reckoning was approaching, and he felt compelled to choose. Unknown to Ian, whispers of Klaus's past bonds with Anya and his loyalty to the prison officials circulated among the inmates, sowing seeds of suspicion. "Can we trust him, or is he still one of them?" Ian murmured privately to his closest allies, fear etched across his face. They watched Klaus with wary eyes, hesitant to embrace a man who was both their enemy and a possible ally. Despite the skepticism, a greater chasm drew closer, a depression that echoed throughout the prison as night fell heavy. Here, Klaus could feel the ripples of impending action surging beneath the surface. The echoes of a certainty began to crystallize within him. He realized he could no longer sit by and play the role of a passive observer. Disguised as a dutiful guard, he initiated a charade that would allow him to gather intelligence on security protocols, while also crafting a new alliance with those who sought liberation. By dropping hints in conversation with Ian and other trusted inmates about potential vulnerabilities within the system, Klaus aimed to weave himself into their clandestine plans. Here lay his thin thread of hope, leading both himself and others towards liberation. In the dead of night, following carefully orchestrated protocols, Klaus joined Ian on a secret reconnaissance mission to ascertain the movements of guards. Each step echoed with a sense of urgency as they maneuvered along the narrow hallways. Their preparation for any potential uprising grew mundane and familiar, a dance between hope and fear. "Tonight, we will meet at the east wall," Ian instructed, the fire kindling in his eyes. "If all goes according to plan, we can execute our escape and recover for what we lost." For the first time, Klaus felt that the walls around them quaked with possibility. The time had arrived. The veins of freedom pulsed dangerously under their feet, an insurgent tide rising to swallow them whole. As night enveloped the prison, the air was electric with tension and anticipation. Shadows flitted about, cloaking the figures in secrecy as they gathered for what was either the dawn of liberation or their impending doom. The prison hummed with anxious energy, echoing the determined hearts that thumped in unison amidst the turmoil. Allies gathered, their faces obscured in moonlight, illuminated by the shimmers of hope that danced across their dreams of freedom. In the center stood Ian, as resolute as ever, ready to lead their charge. "Stick together, we move as one," he commanded, a fierce assurance tethered to daunting fear. Klaus, bound between his new loyalties and the oppressive threat from the guards, felt an intense surge of dread. The line between freedom and betrayal blurred in the darkness of their shared resolve. But in this shared moment, he embraced his duality, a guardian of prisoners turned traitor to the regime. As they navigated the labyrinthine maze toward the east wall, they were captured by the reality of their surroundings. Each corner they turned dripped with memories of confinement, of sorrow interlaced with defiance. Tension held them captive as they rounded one final turn. The wall loomed before them, tall and foreboding, yet beckoning. But as they approached, the silence broke like glass shattering on the floor. A clamor of footsteps echoed behind them, guards reacting to the sudden movement. Panic surged through the group as they looked back, the shadows transforming from allies to adversaries. The gates of opportunity were closing, pressure mounting like a coiled spring ready to snap. "Now, go!" Ian shouted as voices shouted from behind, giving rise to chaos. Klaus, finally feeling the weight of uncertainty, grabbed Ian and pulled him along, pushing him toward the wall. But the air filled with the sounds of steel boots pounding against stones, a chilling reminder of the net tightening around them. In that heart-stopping moment, the tide turned. Guards stormed in, torches blazing with an unforgiving intent. The bonds of solidarity shattered under the weight of confrontation, and Klaus felt himself falter. Guards grappled for control, their movements swift and ruthless, tearing apart the collective resolve of those who had dared to hope. "Get back, move!" Ian shouted, his voice trailing into the cacophony, but to no avail. Klaus felt a surge of adrenaline push through him, feet pounding against the cold stone, racing toward the doorway. Yet the prison, once a symbol of pain, became a battleground entwined with conflicting ideals. The invisible lines between camaraderie and betrayal, duty and defiance bled into one another, creating a maelstrom of confusion. As the confrontation escalated in a shower of clashing ideologies, Klaus's eyes caught a glimpse of Anya, standing defiantly among the turmoil, fighting against the guards. In that moment, the piece of himself he'd buried deep surged to the surface. Elysium crumbled, loyalties disintegrating amid the fury of fate. Covering the ground between them, Klaus felt the winds of change sweep through him, forcing him to reconsider not just his choices but his past allegiances. In the chaotic fray, he reached for Anya's hand, hoping to make one last stand together. But the fateful night carved deeper scars on the landscape of their lives. Acts of rebellion morphed into desperate gambles, and convictions switched from whispers to roars in the darkness. Each moment filled with struggle carried the weight of history, transforming the prison from a fortress into a battlefield for all who dared to seek freedom. In the aftermath of that fateful night, the prison lay still, yet the air crackled with the remnants of conflict. The echoes of gunfire and muffled cries haunted the halls, an indelible mark etched upon the cold concrete. And as dawn broke, illuminating a new day, the reality of loss cloaked the survivors in a heavy shroud. Klaus found himself swept into the turmoil that descended upon the institution, the fallout from the chaos rippling through the administration, while questions echoed hollowly in the wake of rebellion. Guards were on high alert, holding their watchful eyes even more closely as disquiet danced through the ranks, a sentiment teetering on the brink of paranoia. Despite the tumult, smart whispers among inmates began navigating the treacherous waters of resilience. Those who remained loyal to the cause took solace in the memory of Ian, who had become a martyr, swallowed by the turmoil yet forever present within the hearts of those who dared to dream. The remnants of their movement lived on, traveling faster than the whisper of fear that gripped the regime. Klaus navigated the hallways under constant scrutiny, but the aching pull within him grew louder. Could he truly stand idly by? Neglecting the call of conscience became a raging torrent, one that expanded into becoming a bridge toward redemption, a longing to confirm he could relinquish his past loyalties. One shared determination remained threaded through the currents, a will to find those who had fallen along the way, to reclaim the lost fragments of fractured dreams. As Lars and other allies rallied within their ranks, they devised clandestine messages, cautiously reaching out beyond the prison walls. Each letter served as a lifeline, every word an act of defiance against the looming dread, pledging connection for the future. But the fallout was not without its consequences. The fallout from the failed rebellion sent waves through the bureaucracy, leading to further clampdowns on dissenters. Klaus stood amidst a gruesome reckoning, reflecting on the choices he had made, the split-second decisions that had shifted trajectories. The guards he once stood beside now regarded him with suspicion, wary of the inner tension coiling within his heart. He found an ease in the quiet corridors, both of them feelers of light within the choking darkness. Oftentimes they would linger on tentative conversations, years of oppression laid bare in the pulsating silence that filled the room. There, amidst the whispers nestled tales of strength and heartbreak, a reminder that dreams persist as long as they are given voice. And then came a turning point, a message delivered in cryptic tones, signaling a culmination of hope, a chance to rise against the overwhelming forces that sought to imprison their ideals. Klaus, harnessing the surge of determination that burned within, readied them for a new plan, one that could transform the small embers of resistance into a roaring fire. The insurgent collective would not perish in silence, but instead celebrate the perseverance clasped within their memories. So a new chapter unfolded, one steeped in resilience and the promise of camaraderie once more. As dawn broke, a sense of inevitability washed over them, a knowing that while the storms may continue to rage, the spirit of resistance owned an indomitable edge, the heartbeat of those yearning for something greater, beyond the realms of fear and betrayal. Even amidst the cold walls that enclosed them, a fire burned bright, illuminating a path toward freedom, an unwavering testament to the sacrifices made and the souls united beneath their shared aspirations. As the days bled into one another, Klaus felt the tension of impending change swell around him. The prison had become a cauldron of whispered alliances, strategies sketched in the dim light of candle flames flickering against damp walls. Shadows danced across the cold concrete, mimicking the restlessness that gripped both inmates and guards alike. It was a time of uncertainty, yet a fierce determination coursed through the veins of those who vowed to reclaim their freedom. Klaus and several inmates, united by their dreams of liberation, huddled in a secluded basement room hidden from the prying eyes of the guards. The air crackled with urgency as they strategized their next move, fueled by a collective fire that refused to be extinguished. "We can't let fear dictate our actions any longer," he urged, the intensity in his voice igniting some of the wearied hearts around him. "We've waited too long to act." Ian's memory loomed large, a specter guiding them forward, and with every discussion they felt his spirit urging them to break free. They devised plans to escalate their rebellion, a gradual but determined push for liberation that would leverage the cracks forming in the regime. "We must strike when they least expect it," a voice amongst them declared, sharing a glint of conspiracy that left no room for doubt. As they plotted, Klaus found himself haunted by dreams of Anya, who had become a symbol of unwavering strength in his mind. He could see her fierce determination, a whirlwind of courage encapsulated in her sharp gaze. Each day without her felt like an unrelenting weight pressing down on him. The thought of reuniting surged within him as both a hope and an agonizing ache, intertwining in a complex dance of longing and urgency. But awareness rippled through their secret meetings. Whispers of guards growing suspicious thrummed like an ominous heartbeat. A plan took shape slowly, with each member understanding that the path ahead was fraught with peril. "Tonight we strike," Klaus announced, the words heavy yet electrifying. They'd wait until the change of shifts when the guards would be less vigilant, enforcing only a skeletal presence within the prison's core. The hours crept by with agonizing slowness, the sun dipping below the horizon as night descended. One by one they steeled themselves, their hearts pounding with trepidation and hope interwoven. Each man clasped the hands of those beside him, the solidarity within their grip testament to the tenuous bond formed in their shared suffering. In that moment, unity became their armor, fortifying their resolve. As they set their plan into motion, Klaus navigated the twisted corridors with a heightened sense of urgency. Every footstep reverberated with possibility, and they moved like specters in the gloom, silent yet determined to carve their path toward freedom. The air buzzed with adrenaline, electric in its weight as they gathered their resources. Yet the predatory sense of oppression loomed, a constant reminder of the hammer of authority that had struck so brutally before. As they reached the guard's central station, Klaus's heart thudded in his chest, but he pressed on. Caution draped over them like a shroud, trembling under the weight of their collective breaths. Then, just as they approached their goal, chaos erupted. An alarm blared through the prison, shattering the night's fragile embrace, a deafening cacophony of blaring sirens and shouts of confusion. Panic set in like wildfire as guards scrambled to control the breach. It had come, a reckoning they had prepared for, yet it caught them off guard in its violent intensity. "Run, now!" Klaus shouted, adrenaline surging as he propelled himself forward. The initial plan of stealth dissolved into a frenzied escape, a desperate bid for freedom amidst the chaos. The once controlled silence erupted into a cacophony of shouts and the pounding of feet against the cold ground, colliding with the harsh notes of alarm as the guards rushed into action. The prison erupted into a maelstrom of confusion, the air laden with the intoxicating scent of fear and determination. Klaus felt a rush of adrenaline, propelling him forward amidst the chaos of teeth-gritted and breathless gasps. In that charged moment, the walls that had once confined them transformed into a canvas of liberation painted in broad strokes of desperation and hope. As they navigated the corridors, Klaus's mind raced. He caught glimpses of fellow inmates sprinting beside him, fueled by a roaring fire of resolve. Each face glistened with a mixture of fear and exhilaration, shadows of their former selves intersecting with aspirations of freedom. The rush of movement reverberated through their bones, each step a defiance against the chains of oppression. They barreled toward the outer gates, the weight of their escape anchored in the knowledge of what lay beyond the razor wire and barred doors. "Keep moving!" Ian's voice echoed amidst the tumult, a rallying cry that propelled them ever onward. Klaus felt the sheer thrill of possibility pushing against the dread that threatened to consume him. But as they reached the final barrier, a wall of guards materialized, determined and furious eyes set upon them like hawks eyeing prey. Klaus's heart plummeted as realization sank in. Freedom was tantalizingly close yet perilously out of reach. "Form a line!" one guard shouted, his voice an order lacing tension through the air as men scrambled in panic. And in that split second, Klaus understood the cost of their fight. The lives across him could be lost to this desperate bid. "Stay together!" he shouted, his hand gripping Ian's resolutely. Breaths quickened. The guards were closing in, their orders slicing through the tension, externalizing the chaos that now defined their existence. Adrenaline coursed through Klaus as he scanned his surroundings. "There, the side exit," he pointed, refocusing the group on a scant opening visible in the growing shadows of uncertainty. They darted for it, the air crackling with desperation. The sound of heavy boots echoed ominously from behind them. "Stop!" they shouted, the chilling declaration echoing into the night. Klaus's pulse surged, and as they reached the exit, a rush of wind engulfed them, carrying the scent of rain and freedom that hung tantalizing just beyond their grasp. As they burst through the narrow opening, the chill of the night air greeted them, electrifying in its promise of freedom. The field beyond stretched out wide under a blanket of stars, an expanse calling them home. Yet as they stumbled into the freedom of night, both exhilaration and fear crashed against their hearts. A few yards ahead, a narrow forest glimmered under the moonlight, beckoning them with its embrace of wild possibilities. "This way!" Klaus urged, leading the charge toward the trees, each branch rustling with the tales of those who'd come before them, everyone who had yearned for liberation. But the freedom dance was fraught with peril. Their flight was no longer guarded whispers but bold shouts echoing through the dark. The alarms wailed behind them, a horrific but distant reminder of the prison they had narrowly escaped. He could feel the eyes of authority lingering behind them like a dark cloud, their dread pulsated in tandem with their escape. They pressed onward into the thicket, each step taken in breathless fervor, surrounded by the comforting embrace of the dark woods. The trees shielded them, yet with every rustle of the branches, the pounding of their hearts echoed a somber reminder of the peril that resided right behind them. As Klaus led the way, he felt an unfamiliar sense of companionship burgeon within. They had shed their identities, transforming from labeled prisoners into glowing beacons of hope, resolute in their pursuit of freedom. Secrets were laid bare. The political rhetoric of their oppressors fell silent in the presence of their shared defiance. Ian had become an anchor in their flight, rallying the group forward. "We need to stick together," he implored, his voice ringing with conviction that resonated even in the shadow of doubt. "We used to be united against them, now we must remain strong against anyone who seeks to bring us down." Hours melded into an agonizing eternity as they traversed the terrain, guided only by the faint glimmer of stars peeking through the branches above. Emotional scars were openly displayed now, struggles shared among those who had once been bound by walls but were now free to express their unvoiced agony. Klaus felt a swell of hope within him as the hours turned toward the cusp of dawn. Still reeling from the realization of betrayal, he understood that redemption lay not only in escape. His thoughts sprang to Anya, the quiet strength she radiated lingering as a constant reminder of the hope they had nurtured together. How deeply he wished for her presence amidst the charged atmosphere, for she embodied everything they fought for. Finally, with the horizon just beginning to bloom into a soft glow, they reached a clearing bathed in muted light. Soft clouds kissed the dawn, a poetic transition from darkness to brightness. It was there they paused, taking stock of their fragmented group. As they gathered together, the gravity of their actions dawned upon them. In the reassuring light of the new day, Klaus spoke with resolve, unearthing the strength he had unearthed throughout their chaotic journey. "This is only the beginning for us," he declared softly, glancing around the faces illuminated by hope. "We must remain vigilant in our fight. The road ahead is unresolved, yet together we will forge the change we dreamed of." Each man nodded, a collective understanding woven into their resolve. They were not merely running from their past, they were channeling that past into a fierce commitment to construct a new future, one where freedom triumphed over oppression. As dawn broke fully, the sun's rays pierced the horizon, casting warmth into their cold skin, igniting flames of resilience within their hearts. They had escaped the confines of physical chains, but the psychological scars they bore would require time to heal. Yet here, in the wild expanse of the unknown, they embraced the potential for redemption and resolution. They were no longer bound by the chains of betrayal or the ideologies that sought to stifle their hope. The path forward remained unwritten, filled with uncertainty, but it was theirs to carve. Together, they ventured into the light of a new dawn, prepared to confront the world beyond the confines of their prison, ready to reclaim their identities and reshape the narrative of their futures. In that moment, they were not just survivors of a broken system, they were the architects of a new beginning. As they moved deeper into the vast expanse of the unknown, the winds of change coursed through their determined hearts. Each step carried the weight of their past, but also the promise of renewal. The sun rose higher, blurring the line between night and day, illuminating their path with a golden glow, a silent benediction on their audacious journey. Klaus, flanked by newfound comrades, felt the joy of liberation mingled with a palpable sense of responsibility. They weren't just escaping oppression, they were breaking ground for others who continued to suffer in silence. He glanced around at the faces beside him, each one a testament to resilience, to defiance, a community forged in the fires of struggle. As the day unfolded, their resolve solidified. They'd find allies beyond the prison walls, fellow travelers in their quest against tyrannical authority. Klaus began to formulate a plan, driven by the stories of those still trapped in the web of oppression. They would gather intelligence, share their tales, and form a network that extended far beyond their immediate circle. With every mile traversed, they remained vigilant, acutely aware of the risks that lingered like shadows on the outskirts of their fledgling freedom. The specter of retribution loomed, yet it fueled their determination. They began to train themselves, learning to navigate the intricacies of the world outside, not as prisoners but as warriors ready to reclaim their futures. They sought refuge in the homes of sympathetic allies, ideologues who shared their vision for a society free from oppression. Stories flowed between them like water, each voice lifting the weight of despair and transforming it into a shared mission, a collective dream of what could be. Sweeping changes were brewing, and they would no longer remain passive spectators, they would be champions of change. The struggles they had faced within the prison walls became a wellspring of motivation, driving them to forge connections with others who had fought and escaped similar circumstances. Discussions unfolded, dreams materialized into plans, and unity began to take form. As word spread of their plight and aspirations, allies began to emerge, eager to join the fight. Each voice added to the growing chorus of freedom rang like a bell across divided landscapes. Klaus felt the power of their movement spreading like wildfire. He saw eyes alight with hope, hearts swelling with possibility. They knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but the foundation they built together was unshakable. Klaus had transformed from an isolated individual burdened by guilt into a pivotal force propelling a movement toward justice. They were united not just by the desire for freedom, but by the unwavering commitment to protect one another. Days turned into weeks, the bitterness of their past transforming into the sweetness of shared celebrations. They organized rallies, collecting stories of those still imprisoned, echoing the calls for reform. The shadows of the past began to lift as they wove their struggles into the tapestry of a larger narrative, illuminating the need for change. Klaus often found himself contemplating Anya, her spirit guiding him through turbulent moments. He remembered their dreams of a world unbound by chains, and with each passing day, he had every intention of bringing that vision to fruition. Summary: justice was not just a dream, it was an attainable reality they could forge together. This new chapter demanded courage, resilience, and a deep commitment to carry forth the banners of freedom. As they crossed into a new territory, a sense of hope blossomed within them, a realization that they were no longer shackled by the ghosts of their past but empowered by their shared purpose. Undeniably, the road ahead remained uncertain, yet they faced it collectively. Together, they became architects of a future, warriors of justice, and through the embers of struggle, they forged the awakening of promised change. In that light, they had discovered who they were truly destined to be, not prisoners, not victims, but champions of hope in a world yearning for liberation.